Jamaica is a highly prospective target area for different kinds of deposits in an island arc terrain.
As probably the most widespread, intensive, and in-depth exploration program that's ever been carried out in this island.
5 or 6 years worth of work into just 2.
No one else has ever done this before. There has been historic work on the island, trending back 150 years.
I think they're getting excited, as we are, so stay tuned.
Hello and welcome to our Mines and Money 5 at 5 show, which today is sponsored by Bunker Hill Mining, American Pacific Mining, and Northisle Copper and Gold, and is brought to you in association with Resource Global Network. For those of you attending 5 at 5 for the first time, the aim of 5 at 5, 5 guests at 5 p.m, is to maintain engagement between investors and miners through a lively interactive format whilst we wait the return of physical events. If you have any announcements before we start, to make the session as interactive as possible, please have your video switched on. To ask a question, you have 2 options. You can either submit them in the chat function, which is at the bottom of your screen, and also at the bottom of the screen, you'll find the participants button. You can go and click on that, and you can go and invite. You can ask yourself to be unmuted. One of my colleagues will then go and unmute you, and you can ask your question or make your comments live. We'll also be having polling questions throughout the webinar where you can go and vote. For today's show, we have a great lineup of guests. They are Sam Ash, Chief Executive Officer of Bunker Hill Mining, Warwick Smith, Chief Executive Officer of American Pacific Mining, Sam Lee, President and CEO of Northisle Copper and Gold, Justin Machin, Director of Denham Capital, and Jennifer Schell, Partner and Portfolio Strategist and Associate Portfolio Manager at Treegrove Investment Management. The three mining companies today, we're going to focus on today cover 4 commodities. So let's start off with a commodities-related polling question. If we can perhaps ask my colleague, if we can just get the polling screen up on the screen, you should be able to see a polling question there saying which commodity you're the most bullish about. You've got 4 that you can go and vote on. And if you disagree with one of the 4 options there, you can go and choose other and even put in the sort of chat box below, which is the other commodity that you feel particularly bullish about. So whilst you're voting, let's go and get the view of our 2 investor guests. Perhaps I can turn to yourself first, Justin Machin from Denham Capital. Perhaps you're going to tell us, obviously, before you answer the question, a little bit about yourself and the investments that Denham Capital are currently focusing on.
Sure. So my name is Justin Machin. I am a director at Denham Capital based in Toronto. Denham is a large diversified global private equity firm. We have about $10 billion under management. On the mining side, we manage about $2 billion. Our strategy is focused on late stage and producing assets. We invest in commodities as benign as copper and as interesting as rare earths and niobium and tin. From a jurisdictional perspective, we're also, we invest across the globe. We've been in places as benign as British Columbia and as exciting as the DRC and Indonesia. We are primarily equity-focused investors, although we do also do structured investments as well. And comfortable ticket size for us out of our fund is kind of anything in the $50 to $100 million range is a good sweet spot for us. So that's a bit about Denham. And then as far as your question on commodities, Andrew, I'm a huge copper bull. I think that that would be my pick. I'm very constructive on the energy transition and electrification theme. And I think that there's just been serial underinvestment in the copper space over the last 10 years. And that combined with declining grade profiles means that there's going to need to be some serious investment over the coming years to catch up and to meet the demands of the EV transition.
Mm-hmm. And Jennifer Schell from Treegrove, are you also a copper bull as well?
I am a copper bull, but I would say I'm more of a gold bull, because if we get gold going, we get some traction there, then I think that that's a leading indicator for some of the other commodities and precious metals. The reason for that is, we've been seeing inflation creeping up. The long-term treasury note in the US is, impacting that as well. And there's usually a correlation between the two of them and the depreciating US dollar. So I'm bullish on gold for the moment, but I am invested in all of the sectors.
And can you also just tell the listeners a little bit about Treegrove? Because I think it's the first time that we've had you as a guest on one of the Minds of Money shows. So I think it would be kind of interesting to know a little bit more about sort of Treegrove, who you are, and what your focus is.
Sure. So I'm with Treegrove Investment Management. It's a boutique investment firm. We have accounts. We cater to high net worth individuals with at least $500,000 and more, and we do customized strategies. I'm a discretionary associate portfolio manager. I make my decisions on my own funds. I diversified. I love mining. I'm from Sudbury, Ontario, so it's in my blood. Mostly everybody in my family is an engineer. So I grew up playing in the tailings areas, which explains my nice glowing complexion. So we do diversified industries, looking at a lot of the minerals and looking at gold, copper, silver specifically for some of my portfolios, and looking for some new treasures to add. So happy to be here.
Yeah, and just in terms of the high net worths that you represent, how has their investment appetite changed towards mining over the last sort of 12 months or so? Because traditionally, I often, when I talk to high net worths based in sort of Canada, I often felt in the last 12 months or so, or looking back further, they've been more sort of focused on Bitcoin or more focused on sort of cannabis. Are they kind of coming back more into sort of mining stocks, or?
Yeah, so that's interesting that you should mention that. The retail investors are gaining a lot of press these days. And I spend a lot of time, we operate digitally, and I've got a big focus on digital outreach and operating that way. So I hang out on the Reddit threads. I know what's up. Silver, there's some talk about silver. There's a lot of ads being done on the Reddit channel, on the social media channels. And I think that going forward, we really need to pay attention to some of those mediums as well. So, Clubhouse is a new one too. There's a lot of retail investors who are looking towards this space and trying to get a good understanding. So, the easier we can make it and the more understandable the whole mining process is from start to finish, with maybe a focus on ESG, I think that would really propel the industry forward.
And just bringing in three sort of miners into this as well. Perhaps turning to Sam Lee of Northisle first. How has Northisle changed its sort of marketing focus towards retail investors over the course of the last 6 to 12 months, as we sort of start seeing sort of like, I guess, sort of the sort of retail appetite for mining stocks change?
That's a good question. I just joined about 4 months ago. And so the answer to that question 4 months ago was we didn't focus at all on the retail space, which is, my background is I'm an institutional guy. I spend most of my time with larger institutions. Clearly for the junior space, there is an issue of illiquidity if you just focus specifically on the institutions. So our focus going ahead is absolutely to remain on track on the retail space, because in the end, if you can't get into a stock and if you can't actually trade the stock and your liquidity is not something that you can certainly control, that's a negative aspect of it. So we're certainly spending a lot more time on the retail space, and social media and other platforms are certainly the leading way that we spend most of our time and money.
And Warwick from American Pacific, how do you reach out to retail investors?
Yeah, I mean, Sam makes a really good point, and actually Jennifer's point about Reddit is quite interesting as well. We've seen this real shift where the retail investors working together can become a real powerful thing. I cut my teeth in investor relations for companies like Fortuna Silver Mines and Northland Resources, et cetera, from an early age. So we were focused on being able to create that liquidity and create that excitement for those stories as they grew, and focused a lot on retail. How we have accomplished that, or how we attempt to accomplish that as we go forward, is by working with a lot of the different newsletter groups. So at American Pacific, when we did our last financing, I'll give an example. We worked with KC Research. We announced a very small financing. We announced a $500,000 financing. KC Research wrote it up at 10 a.m. And by the end of that day, I had a $5 million book. and that was all retail with some small funds that follow them. So that kind of gives you an idea of the power that these different newsletter groups, when they like your story, when they like your management, can create. And certainly they've been great shareholders, continue to cover the story, etc. And there's lots of those newsletter writers out there, and you know, taking the time to build relationships with them has been something that I've focused on over the course of time, and I think is worthwhile for junior mining companies.
And Sam Ash from Bunker Hill, do you work with any newsletter writers?
We are reaching out, and we are working with a few newsletter writers. We find that a very useful medium. And in addition, you know, we're really focusing on trying to get out there in the using video as a media to reach the retail shareholders, trying to show what we're doing at the mine, sharing short video clips, and almost move to a monthly or bi-weekly, you know, short video blog, just showing the progress and the update and what's going on here at the mine site.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I think we can now kind of close the poll now, and then if you have the polling result up on the screen, we'll see that copper was the clear winner today with 54% of the votes. And we'll be having another polling question later on in the show. So let's move on to our first mining update, which is going to be from Bunker Hill Mining. So we'll just go and get Bunker Hill slides up. Whilst we're doing that, let me just give a short sort of introduction about Bunker Hill. The speaker from Bunker Hill is Sam Ash, who you just heard from. He's Chief Executive Officer of Bunker Hill Mining. He's a former Executive General Manager of Barrick's Gold Lumwana Copper Mine in Zambia. And without further ado, I'd like to hand the floor over to Sam Ash.
Thank you, Andrew. If we can go ahead and advance the slides a couple through the you know, the kind of the standard cautionary statements, and we'll get into the meat of the project or program. So Bunker Hill Mine, I'm aware we've got a short period of time, so this will be pretty brief, but we're located in the Silver Valley in northern Idaho. The Bunker Hill Mine was a mine that was in continuous operation from the late 1800s. Absolutely iconic mineral asset in the United States, kind of fundamental to supplying the United States through the Industrial Revolution, 2 world wars, with primarily lead and zinc. What's interesting is that over that time period, silver was a byproduct, no operational or geologic focus, and over that time produced 165 million ounces. So by size, the Bunker Hill Mine is the largest mine in the Silver Valley by tonnage extracted, and it's number 2 or 3 in silver produced over that time frame. The mine went into closure in 1982, primarily related to its environmental performance in conjunction with the Clean Water Act and the Clean Air Act. Since that time, the federal government has stepped in and cleaned up not only the Bunker Hill, but the entire Silver Valley with a Superfund cleanup. And we are coming in and we've been on site for about a year, working on bringing the asset back into production. It still has a tremendous mineral endowment. The mine was not closed in any way, shape, or form because of the full extraction of the economic mineral potential. And we are about 2 weeks away from a PEA being published, and we have a strong resource base. We published our first resource in September, and just recently, last week, published an updated resource with a significant amount of indicated material that will carry us through PFS mid-year, at which point we'll be looking to finance a fairly rapid restart, 18 to 24 months past that period of time. What's great about the mine is that the mineralization is largely developed. It's essentially picking up where mining left off in 1980. Primarily, it's a zinc dominant from a revenue stream, but it has significant silver potential. And that's in parallel to the restart. That's what we're working on the exploration side, looking to move that bar to a silver dominant position from a revenue stream as we go forward. So we just move forward. I'll talk briefly about the team, and this is where, and this is fundamental to our story. Our executive chairman, Richard Williams, he's a former chief operating officer at Barrick, and Brad Barnett, VP of Sustainability. He was the head of global closure for Barrick. we came to this asset as, over a longstanding conversation about, where the future of mining is going and how we wanted to participate in that. And that's really, we feel that, the days of multi-billion-dollar capital investments in risky jurisdictions that result in outsized environmental and social impact, I think those days are coming to an end in the mining industry. In parallel, the demand for metals continues to grow. And we thought that there was an opportunity to be entrepreneurial and really, be in the forefront of transitioning mining to what we believe it will become and necessarily needs to become in the future. That's a very different company with sustainability really setting the foundation of strength for a long and enduring organization. And we see Bunker Hill as the first step to be able to build a multi-asset company that accomplishes just that. When you look across the Western United States, there's a whole laundry list of assets that have a tremendous mineral endowment, but are distressed, and they're just waiting for the right management team with the right focus and the right ability to, to bring those assets online.
Okay. If that's the end of your presentation, I'll just dive in with the first question. Your management team looks absolutely fantastic. What makes your approach different from the previous management teams?
Well, we're very clear on this in all of our communication, and I think it comes down to intent and approach. So number one, our intent is absolutely to restart and bring this mine into operation and have it be the cornerstone asset of a multi-asset mining company. We obviously come from an operating background, and we are looking to bring this mine into production and have it to be the cornerstone asset of a growing company. And I think the other one is the approach. When you look at some of the previous management teams and you compare how we have approached this to some of the management teams in the past, we're very results focused and oriented. In the last year, we've conducted 2 drilling programs. We published the first 43101 compliant resource since the mine went into closure in 1982. We've addressed the water management challenge head on. We've reduced the metal in the mine effluent by 70% already. And we're moving forward. We just published an updated resource and we'll have a PEA in the next couple of weeks. And all that is in just about a year's time with where we started, which was essentially a dormant company a little under a year ago.
Okay. And bringing in Justin Machin from Denham Capital. Justin, do you have any thoughts about the Bunker Hill project or any questions for Sam?
It sounds like a really interesting opportunity. Sam, can you give us a bit of flavor for where you're expecting to come out on the PEA from maybe a CapEx perspective, and then timeline to first production, and then lastly, what are we talking about here from a scale and then a cash flow perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's obviously we're just a couple of weeks away from the PEA, so we certainly have some pretty good thoughts and ideas about where we're going to end up. On the CapEx question, it's important to understand, where what the heavy lifts are and where those are structured in that restart. So we have a mine that when the mine went into closure in 1980, it was developed certainly in the upper levels of the mine for rubber tired access. So it is fairly large. The development is extensive. And the majority of the resource is fully developed and ready to exploit from a mining perspective. So that means the heavy lift is really going to be on the processing side. We're doing some interesting things on the processing side that dovetail with our vision and what we think about ESG. We're going to build an underground processing plant with underground tails deposition, both for geotechnical paste, but also for tails deposition. And that's going to have the knock-on effect of addressing the key environmental challenge, which is acid mine drainage, as we begin to fill up all of the historic mining voids. From a scale, we're thinking, certainly in the 8 figures for a restart, that range, if it's 30 to 60, 40 to 80, somewhere in that range. Coming out of that, we'll really be able to advance at the pace that we'll be able to advance the processing solution. So we're thinking 18 to 24 months for a restart, with the opportunity of pre-production revenue as mining is a lot closer than the processing plant.
Right. Okay.
And just obviously bring in Jennifer from Treegrove. Do you have any thoughts or questions for Sam?
Yeah, thanks, Sam. Good management, great location. I'm glad you touched on the ESG aspect because my question was actually around the tailings and how instead of having a surface area pond for your tailings, you're going to have underground tailings. Can you explain the benefits by proceeding that way?
Well, certainly from a financial perspective, it precludes us from the needing to make the investment in a tails dam and a surface tails deposition. I think when you look at the broader mining space, tails can often be, an environmental liability over the long run. We have the opportunity here to actually deposit tails in a way that will be a net benefit to the environment because it exists or it addresses an existing environmental challenge going into closure. So it's really kind of a unique opportunity in that regard. And, and that as far as the practicality of it, it will be a thickened paste tails that we put in there. And the intent is really to break the chemical reaction, reduce the transmissivity of water and reduce the oxygen in the acid mine generating areas that that were uncovered historically.
Just another question for myself, Sam. Can you just go into a bit more detail about your plans to execute a restart at the mine?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple of key milestones that we're looking at that will lead up to that. Certainly. That we had the first one late last week when we published the updated resource with a significant amount of indicated material. That's going to be the foundation of the PEA, which will come out in early April. That work is already ongoing to advance the to a PFS stage. We expect that to be coming out mid-year. On the back of that, we'll be running a structured restart financing. And then subsequently to the, and we expect to have that in place somewhere into summer, early fall, at which point you will be able to begin, the restart process in earnest, and expect that to take 18 to 24 months.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. We'll definitely come back to you later on in the show, Sam. So I think just for now, we'll just move on to our next mining update. And our next mining update is from Warwick Smith. Warwick is Chief Executive Officer of American Pacific Mining. Warwick is a venture capitalist specializing in corporate finance and development for publicly traded companies. I'm not going to go through all of his bio here, but at our recent Mines and Money online event, American Pacific did actually win one of our mining pitch battles. So hopefully that makes it, so I think that definitely makes it a very, very investable project. But here to go and tell us more is Warwick Smith.
Thanks, Andrew. Much appreciated. I wish you hadn't brought that up. That means I have to perform properly now. American Pacific Mines is a Western U.S. based exploration company run by myself and my partner Eric Saderholm. Eric is the former head of exploration in the Western U.S. for Newmont. Last year, we did a transformative transaction by picking up the Madison mine, which is down in Montana and is under partnership with Rio Tinto. Rio may spend up to $30 million US to earn 70% of the project. We have two other great assets in the Western US, Tuscarora, which is a high-grade epithermal system just outside of Elko, Nevada, and a Gooseberry, which is just outside of Reno, past producing mine that hasn't been touched since 1994. Silver gold, incredibly excited about that. That's going to see drilling this year as well from a partnership on that as well. 65 million shares out. $1.5 million in cash, $1 million in securities. We burn about $100,000 a month, but don't let the low burn rate fool you. We'll have somewhere in the range of around $7 to $8 million worth of drilling done in 2021. The bulk of which is being done by Rio Tinto, who will do a $5 million or so US program this year. They are just starting now. Very excited to get them back on site. This is their third drill campaign at Madison. Madison is a high-grade skarn at surface with a porphyry underneath. There is somewhat of a unique story as to how we got this, which I will tell as quickly as I can. We actually went underground and looked at this in 2016. Another company negotiated and bought it out before we could get involved. Did a great job. They drilled into the porphyry in 2017. April of 2019, they brought in Rio Tinto as a partner. June of 2019, so 2 months later, they halted and decided they were going to become a company called Mind Medicine, which is focused on medical mushrooms. So we were able to purchase the asset for $2.4 million in stock. They came along with the partnership with Rio Tinto, developed a great relationship with those guys. They've done a fantastic job. Needless to say, at a $15 million market cap, owning 30% of a Rio Tinto sized target could be incredibly lucrative for shareholders. So we're very excited to see their drilling this year.
Okay, thank you for an absolute. Sorry, a bit of echo there. Thank you for an excellent summary. Perhaps I can just bring in Jennifer first. Jennifer, do you have any kind of questions for Warwick, or any sort of thoughts about the project?
Yeah, it looks really exciting work. Just wondering, with your partnership or your JV with Rio Tinto, and then I noticed in your report that you were going to leverage this relationship for potentially developing other projects. Can you touch on that?
Yeah, certainly. So we took over this partnership with Rio. They've been much, and I'll be careful how I say this. It's clearly David and Goliath. We're a fairly small company. They're the second largest mining company in the world. That can come with its challenges for a junior company. And we had concerns about that going in. That hasn't ended up being the case. They've been tremendous partners, and all credit to Eric, my business partner. He's done an excellent job of developing a really good relationship with the team over there. Yeah, we'd like to expand upon that, and we're certainly hoping to do so as we go forward, and in the process of having initial conversations with them on that. They've been great to work with in terms of news flow, in terms of access. They've been a really, really good partner. So I'm really, really pleased with that.
And then Justin from Denham, do you have any questions for Warwick?
Yes. So Warwick, what are the particulars of the deal with Rio? I mean, how much do they have left under their spending commitment? To what point are you carried? And then in addition to the drilling that you guys are doing this year, what are the other kind of near-term catalysts for the story?
Yeah, absolutely. There's quite a few, so I'm glad you asked that question. The deal is this: they've spent $3.8 million US so far. They can earn into 55% at a $5 million US spend, 60% at a $15 million spend, and then 70% at a $30 million US spend. I would suggest that they will earn into the JV this year, although I think they will not earn their percentage or choose the earn in until they get to 70%. As they've explained to us, this is their premier exploration asset for 2021. 70 to 80% of their geologic staff is on this, so they feel that they are cracking the code, especially on that scar and its surface. So it's a significant program for them. It's becoming a significant asset for them, which gives us a great deal of excitement going forward. So that pleases us. We're free carried until they do. So if they earn 70%, they would have spent $30 million US. There's a significant amount of news between here and there. Quite frankly, our belief is that if they find what they're hoping for, which is really they're looking for something analogous to the Butte Line, which is the third largest porphyry in the world. That's about 42 kilometers from where we are. That produced 21 billion pounds of copper, 715 million ounces of silver, 3 million ounces of gold, etc. If they find anything like that, they're going to want on 100% of it. So our 30% becomes very lucrative, similar to Reservoir when they were taken out by Nevson. That was an epithermal at surface and became a porphyry underneath. We're hoping for something similar there. I think that was a $300 million takeout for Reservoir's 30%. So that's the ultimate goal. In the short term, there's a lot of catalysts coming up. They drilled 8 holes last year. We've released 3 of them. First hole was a 1.5 meters of 69 grams per ton gold and 40 meters of 0.2% copper. 5 more holes pending that we're going to put out. So we'll have that out shortly. They are on site as we speak, have started trenching already. They're going to do a mag survey. They're going to drill up to 31 core holes, up to 50 RC holes. All of that is starting as we speak. So there is a significant program underway there as we go right now. Did a lot of work last year on the data side. They would have done this large program last year, had it not have been for COVID, but they can only have one drill on site at a time for social distancing. So what they did was they relogged all the 2017 core, put together a fantastic looking 3D model, named 5 Jasperoid bodies. And like any good mining company, they named each body after a local brewery. So that was great. So they're drilling those to extend those this year, all near surface, all very high grade. This is a very high grade project. It produced from 2008, 2012, small scale production, 2.8 million pounds of copper, but it ranged between 20 and 35% copper. We had a hole from surface drilled of 61 meters of almost 7% copper, fantastic gold grades, etc. There's something below that's pushing up towards this skarn at surface that's creating a lot of excitement. I hope that answers the question, but yeah, significant amount of news flow coming up here in short order.
And does Rio expect them to scope any economics on the property anytime soon, or are they really just focused on seeing how big this thing is?
I think they're focused on seeing how big it is. That's where they're at for today. We hope by the end of this campaign that they're going to put out a resource. I think they're likely to do so. They haven't guided us that yet, but that certainly feels like it should be the indication that there should be a resource by the end of this campaign. Ultimately, they're looking to make this big. It's Rio Tinto. They're looking for a large asset. Look, when we got into this, I'll be honest, it's very high grade skarn at surface, with the porphyry down below. We felt that Rio Tinto was going to be porphyry or bust. That was our feeling. That hasn't been the case. They've shown a lot of interest in the skarn at surface. They worked on that last year. The bulk of this year's program is focused on the skarn as well. They continue to make it a long strike, and deeper as they go. So far so good.
Fantastic, thank you.
And just taking in one question from the audience. A question from the audience from John Zadkovich. Good assets and impressive results. However, why the relatively flat share price?
Yeah, I'm glad someone's asked that because it gives me an opportunity to kind of address it. Paper dynamics more than anything, which I know is things that people don't necessarily like to talk about, but this is where we're at. When we did the transaction, we raised some money at 12.5 cents. By the time that came free trading, people were up 4 to 5 times their money. So people took profits and it came back. And then more importantly, we paid 20 million shares for this asset. Those came free trading at the end of December, on December 26. 16 million of those went out and the other 4 million just went out. And we've seen some of those hit the market. As much as we kind of joke about the medical mushroom company, their shareholders got shares in the medical mushroom company and us, and the medical mushroom company is a couple $1 billion company now, so they did well. That's all right. We're not in a position where we need cash. We are seeing a significant amount of drilling this year. We had about a $50 million market cap before. We suspect that with some excitement that we can get back there and exceed it, and we look forward to doing so.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. It's been an absolutely fantastic update. So let's move on to our next mining update, which is from Northisle Copper and Gold. So perhaps we can have their slides rather up on the screen. Sam Lee was appointed to the role of President and CEO of Northisle in October 2020. Over the past 20 years, Mr. Lee has advised on some of the most prominent M&A, equity and debt transactions in the international and Canadian global mining industry, totaling over 100 billion in value. Sam, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Andrew. And based on what Justin and Jennifer said earlier on, I have to thank my predecessors for including the name copper and gold in our name. So Northisle Copper and Gold. So our objective here is to build Canada's leading sustainable mineral resource company for the future. So we own over 50 kilometers of copper gold porphyry trend in the northern part of Vancouver Island. And our assets are informed by approximately 7 billion pounds of copper equivalent of indicated and inferred. If you want to look at this as a gold equivalent basis, that's over about 15 million ounces of indicated and inferred in total. We just released a PEA study that suggests that the mine is approximately 22 years life of mine, with about 150 million pounds of copper equivalent production per year at a very low all-in sustaining costs of Canadian $2.14 per pound of equivalent copper. So on a gold basis, this is about a 300,000 ounce gold equivalent production asset for over 22 years. So from a gold perspective, it's a very large project. From a copper perspective, it's a medium-sized project, and we think that there's a significant amount of materiality for our investors. So our leadership team is high pedigree. Dale Corman is our chairman. He was responsible for Western Silver. He's the chairman for Western Copper. Western Silver was best known, for discovering the Penasquito deposit and moving it to the feasibility stage, which it's then sold to Glamis Gold for $1.2 billion. Obviously, Penasquito is now in Newmont Gold Corp, one of their more prolific mines. Kevin O'Kane, he's got over 40 years of experience with BHP and SSR. Kevin's worked on some of the most formative operations in the copper space, including Spence, Sierra Colorado, and Mineral Escondida. Jack McClintock, who was my predecessor in our current VP exploration, he's best known for discovering the Spence deposit for BHP, which is currently in production. So a very significant leadership team with lots of ability to find mines, develop them, and finance them. So we're very well positioned moving forward. So this is really a very important slide because this really shows our positioning, where we're at on the northern side of Vancouver Island. To the right-hand side, you see that green blob. That's BHP's Island Copper Mine. That was in production for over 24 years. Very similar grade, very similar size as our mine. They ship their concentrate through that inlet copper moly concentrate to Sumitomo. Very high quality, high premium concentrate, low deleterious elements. All that infrastructure still exists, the road networks, the power substation, and most importantly, the port, which is still permitted as a deep sea water port. We're only 25 kilometers away from that port, which is trucking distance on a very flat-lying terrain. So in all respects, this is the point A positioning for any project that is looking to be contemplated. So just a bit of a snapshot on our scoping study. So as I said, you can think of this project as about a $1.1 billion Canadian project. That's NPV8 after tax at $3.25 copper, 1650 gold. So that's an analyst consensus on both measures. It's what some of the larger incumbents contemplate as part of their future operations. Every 25-cent increase in copper price increases the NPV by about $300 million. We're currently obviously in a copper price environment of $4.10, which is close to $1 higher than when we initially contemplated this study a month ago. So significant leverage to the copper price and an IRR that is quite high. It's 19% for a 22-year mine life copper and gold project. So again, very compelling economics that are going to certainly inform our decision on moving forward into the PFS. So to wrap it up, what we're doing over the next 6 to 12 months, we're rapidly advancing into that pre-feasibility study. We're going to contemplate a number of trade-off studies, including using that Island Copper mine infrastructure that is currently owned by the First Nations Quatsino Group, which purchased it from BHP, and then BHP itself, who still own the mine and the foreshore. Concurrent to that, and probably just as, if not more important, we just raised over $10 million in capital, 7 million of which is going to accelerate our 2021 exploration program, advancing a 10,000 meter drill program that's going to look to increase the size, tonnage, and grade of our current operations significantly, mostly coming from our Red Dog exploration targeting, and then probably as important, targeting our very large Pemberton Hills project, which was a joint venture with Freeport, again, to Warwick's point, of a very similar type of structure, 3.5 by 1.5 kilometer lithocap that is very similar in size to what the Timok deposit had under Nevson and Freeport joint venture. So that's something that we're ongoing, we're drilling right now, and we should see results coming over the next couple of months. So concurrent to that, obviously our consultation with First Nations and community partners are essential for us as we advance those. And then of course, just taking a very disciplined approach to strategic alternatives, including future financings and partnerships.
Okay. Thank you very much for an excellent summary. I'd like to go and hand the floor over, first of all, to Justin Machin from Denham. Justin, do you have any thoughts about the project or any questions for Sam?
Sam, great to reconnect. It's been a while. I haven't had a chance to see you since you got in the seat. So congratulations.
Thank you.
You know, I think porphyry copper projects in good jurisdictions like British Columbia are, I mean, that is the future. And this is where the large companies are going to get all their growth from going forward. So great decision to join Northisle. But just wanted to ask, you know, I know permitting in BC is always perceived as a challenge. So wanted to get a sense for how you're approaching that. And then additionally, you know, this is a fairly large nut to crack from a capital perspective. So how are you guys thinking about taking this project forward and ultimately, you know, advancing it to the point of either, you know, production or a sale?
Sure, great questions. Okay, so on the permitting side, the way I see BC is an extremely transparent process to permit. It does take longer than most regions in the world, including Africa, Chile, Peru. But as we all know, when we get the permits in BC, that's assurance that it's going to actually produce within the scope of the study. And so as we see some of these other projects in other jurisdictions bumping up against the social disruption that obviously stall these mines and sometimes completely close them, I'm very confident that the extra time that we spend upfront today is going to give this assurance that in the future, everyone prospers from this, including First Nations, including the community and other stakeholders that are attached to the mine. So that's something that really appealed to me, given that this mine literally is in my backyard. We literally went to the site last week. It took us 7 hours to drive across that's including the ferry terminal. And so this is something that's very close to my heart. I want this to be developed in a sustainable and responsible way. I'm absolutely convinced that this will be developed during this cycle, as demonstrated by the PEA. And, you know, we obviously want to be the ones to do it. The second part of your question in terms of the CapEx, I look, I mean, as I said, I've done a lot of these transactions on the partnership side, on the M&A side, on the traditional financing side. I actually don't view this CapEx as being materially too big. It's 1.1 billion US. So as I said before, it's kind of a medium-sized copper project. It's a large gold project for sure, but the idea of financing this through 100% equity or doing the detour or the Cisco type model of raising 100%, that's not going to happen for this project. This is a legitimate copper project with a very significant gold component. It's 100,000 ounces of gold production a year for 22 years. We never do this, but if you were to put a stream on that, 100% stream at 5% cost of capital, $400 in the future, ongoing payments, last money in, this is a $1.2 billion US stream. Obviously, we'll never do that. It impacts our economics way too drastically, but that just gives you a glimpse of how significant that gold component of the story is. So at every stage gate, there's also partnerships at the project level, which is going to be driven by the fact that our concentrate will be pure, high quality, premium concentrate. We know this because we're right beside the Island Copper project, which sold their concentrate to Sumitomo. Very low deleterious elements, high grade concentrate with a gold kicker in there. The moly concentrate has iridium content in it, which obviously ebbs and flows as it relates to the airline industry, but that is also a very important part of the byproduct exposure as well. So I'm actually not as worried around the financing ticket because there are multiple reasonably low dilution options that exist at every stage gate. And the fact that we were able to raise $10 million over the last 4 months, and when I started, we were only a $10 million company 4 months ago, and we were able to do it at a much higher cost of capital than, a much higher share price rather than when I first started, leads me to believe that, again, at every stage gate, we will make the judicious decision of moving forward and establishing a responsible capital allocation strategy for the size of where we are.
That's really fantastic. Thanks, Sam.
Thank you for that. Jennifer, do you have any questions for Sam?
I do. Congrats on your raise, Sam. That's significant and awesome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, I was wondering if you could talk about the economics around your metallurgy and the recoveries, and maybe give us an idea or some kind of benchmark of what's expected and what you're up against.
Yep, that's a very good question. So this is a very typical copper porphyry system where the copper reports out to the chalcopyrite. So high recoveries, close to 90% recoveries. The gold reports to the pyrite, which is obviously a tricky process from a metallurgical perspective. Luckily enough, that was my background. I'm a metallurgist, so I can speak with some level of confidence here. But our gold does report out in around 47% recoveries. We've improved that from 36% to 47% based on increased metallurgical testing, mostly due to the lixiviants and reagents that we used in the process flow sheet. We've remained exactly the same in terms of our flow sheet, which is 100 micron primary, 30 micron secondary grind. So the grind, I think we've got a good handle on that. The next stage in terms of the metallurgy to capture that extra increase in gold. So for these types of high pyrite systems, you could kind of expect 50% to 70% recoveries, right? So we are certainly on the lower end of that recovery scale. And so the next step for us would be to contemplate using a cyanide leach on the concentrate as part of the final process. And, based on just very general numbers, every 2 to 3% recovery on the gold is about $200 to $300 million of NPV capture. So as you can see, it doesn't take much to justify an additional portion of the circuit. And as I said, our CapEx is already only $1.1 billion. So I think we do have some room to add a little bit more if we start seeing, greater recoveries towards that 60-70% level.
Thank you.
There's a question being sent in from the audience. Sam, you mentioned the former BHP mine and associated infrastructure. Conceivably, you will look to leverage off that moving forward. What is the condition of that infrastructure?
Right, it's a very good question. So the mine ceased production in 1995. So right now we have a flooded mine, which is called Pit Lake, and that's used as a neutralization pond for the acid rock drainage that sits around the edge of the mine. There's a permitted port facility. There's a port on top of that facility, or the foreshore rather, but that port is at this point unusable. The BHP is in the process of reclaiming that port and cleaning it up, which is great because at the end they pass it back to the government or the First Nations community who purchased the land in a clean state, but yet it's still permitted as a port facility, which is absolutely huge because these things, as people know, can take years to permit, and it's only 25 kilometers away from our operation, which is fantastic. The power, there's a 130 kilovolt substation that exists on site on the BHP site, which needs to be refurbished, but that doesn't take more than perhaps $10 million. And then, of course, the road networks are all currently in place, most of which I'd say about 75% of the road network that gets to the peripheral of the projects is maintained by BC Hydro, or BC government rather. And the other 25% is maintained by the Western Forest Products, which is the company that has the logging tenure for our property. So we literally just drove it last week. It takes 15 minutes, 20 minutes to get from Port Hardy to the Island Copper Pit on a beautifully paved road. And it takes about 40 minutes to get from Port Hardy to the northern end of our project, which we call the Red Dog on, as I said, 75-80% paved roads, 20% well-maintained graded roads. Incredible infrastructure. Port Hardy is a wonderful place to live. In fact, would love to buy a place there, quite frankly. It's a town known for mining, fishing, and forestry. That's their claim to fame. Obviously, it was the hub for the BHP Island Copper Mine. Our director, Kevin O'Kane, who just joined us, lived in Port Hardy for 13 years whilst being the chief mining engineer for the Island Copper Mine. He had 2 of his boys born in Port Hardy. It's just a wonderful place to live and visit. I encourage anybody who wants to see the property for themselves to come by, ping me. I'd be happy to show them around. Obviously, it's in Canada, which is a huge advantage for people that live in Canada, especially the research community that all have been lining up to do their first diligence trips across country and do a little bit of fishing and skiing as well. So I invite anybody who's interested to come on site to really see the incredible infrastructure that this project possesses.
Sure. Thank you very much for that. A kind of sort of like a common theme that sort of like occurred across all three mining projects we've had presented today, both from Sam Lee, from Warwick Smith at American Pacific, and then earlier on from Sam Ash at Bunker Hill. We've had a number of questions around sustainability and ESG. So I'm just curious just to go to our two investor guests, perhaps going to Justin Machin from Denham first. What are the key sort of ESG sort of sustainability criteria you use when you are looking to make an investment?
It's a good question. I think we're spending an increasingly large amount of time on ESG related initiatives. I think we're looking for companies that are doing their part for the environment, that are partnering and helping the communities where their projects are located. Depending on the jurisdiction, we look to things like the IFC performance standards, the Equator principles, and so it is something that's very much in our focus when we're looking at new deals, and for our existing portfolio companies.
Yeah, and then for yourself, Jennifer, I mean, because obviously you could have quite a different sort of like investment management company to Denham Capital. What are the sort of like key sort of ESG sustainability criteria that your high net worth investors have? Do they sort of like have any particular sort of like parameters that they kind of give to you, or do you have any sort of parameters at your end?
Yeah, so just moving along the whole abbreviation of ESG. So on the environmental aspect, people understand that there are some environmental issues, and it's just facing those issues and being able to communicate those adequately with investors without all the jargon. So being able to address them and saying, yes, we know this exists, this is how we're going to address that, is really important. Second, just engaging the community. So is there education happening? Are there opportunities for employment in the area? Are you working with the Aboriginal communities in the area? That sort of thing. And then also a third is governance. So when you have your management teams, I know this is a very male dominated industry, and that's fine, but it's just being supportive of other, diversified members of the team and being there to mentor them and guide them along, and even to encourage some new geologists that are coming up and saying, yeah, this is what we're doing, to make sure that there's a continuation and there's, future generations who are going to be available to work on these projects. So that's what I look at. Fundamentally, though, number one, I look at management. If I like management, they're good people, they're doing good things, they're passionate about the project and what they're doing for the community, then that's a number one factor in my book.
Mm-hmm. And going to Sam Ash of Bunker Hill, I'm guessing you obviously for probably at every investor meeting that you're having these days, you're probably getting asked a number of questions about your ESG sustainability credentials. What are the sort of, if there's like one main question that investors are constantly asking you about Bunker Hill, surrounding ESG and sustainability, what is it, and what is your answer to that question?
Well, I think that primarily rests around some of the operating history at Bunker Hill, and there's no question that from the late 1800s to the 1980s, that what happened and the way that the mine was operated resulted in an environmental disaster. There's no question about that. And then there's also some knowledge about the Superfund, and quite honestly, there is some skepticism about how do you move that forward. And I think that the way that we really address that is number one, acknowledge that that the way the mine was operated in the past was absolutely resulted in a disaster, and to embrace that, acknowledge that, and then articulate how us as an organization are approaching this differently, not just because of this asset, but fundamentally because the kind of company that we're looking to build. And Jennifer, I was appreciated you talking about sustainability as broader than just a environmental aspect. Certainly the environmental aspect here at our site is front and center. But when we think about sustainability, we think about sustainability, really what it means to us is building an organization that has the strength to meet challenges wherever it might operate. And you know, that aspect of diversity, that aspect of community engagement and involvement. I think that's the cornerstone of what builds long-term a successful, strong organization. And that's very much a focus that we have as we're building our company as well.
Thank you for that answer. Warwick Smith of American Pacific, when you're having your meetings with investors that are looking to invest into American Pacific, what's their number one sort of ESG sustainability question that they ask American Pacific?
So I'm going to give a bit of a roundabout answer to that, but one of the things that I'm often saying to people who are representing high net worths or are small funds or small family offices, etc. And if you're looking to invest in juniors, it's great to invest with one that has a tier one major as a partner, or even a mid-tier as a partner. And I simply say that because the amount of due diligence and understanding that goes into these projects from them is significant. So certainly having Rio there, Rio has done a tremendous job of understanding what the environmental impact will be, but also understanding that if they find what they want, that they can build it. Environmental issues are key to Montana. Where we are in Montana is down in Silver Star. Quite honestly, if you took your family to a holiday in Montana, you likely wouldn't go to Silver Star. It is very much a mining-based part of Montana. But Rio has certainly spent a lot of time focusing on that, and it's been great to be in partnership with them for that. What I will say is, I'll agree with Sam and with Jennifer. I think it goes beyond that. Eric Saderholm, who's my partner, has done a fantastic job of mentoring younger geologists and working with them and bringing that part of the business forward. And I think that's really important. Jennifer, you mentioned trying to look for more female geologists, et cetera, that as to be part of the team. And that's something that we've continued to do and will continue to do going forward. We're looking to be a diversified miner. We're looking to attract that younger generation to both work with us and invest with us. And that's something that I think is incredibly important for this business as it goes forward. I can say that when I got into this business 20 some odd years ago, one of the largest challenges that I had is it was certainly a much older crowd that was running all of the companies, everybody wearing a blue suit and a red tie, and they all sort of blended into each other. So it was challenging as a young man, because they all recognized you and it was hard to recognize them and separate everybody. That's something that needs to change going forward. We're seeing a bit of that now, which is good, and hopefully more of it going forward.
And given the sort of last word to Sam Lee at Northisle, I know you talked a little bit earlier in your presentation about the work you've been doing with the First Nations. Is that the number one ESG type sustainability question you get from investors who are thinking about investing into Northisle, or is it something different?
It's definitely an important one, but I think that the fact that we're located in BC really intrigues a lot of people, because all the incumbents, the majors in the world, they all have this wonderfully bold strategy of being carbon neutral by 2050. But the fact of the matter is, and I think that's a wonderful strategy and a wonderful goal to have, but you need to have a source of power that is also sustainable and renewable. And in BC, that's what we have, 100% renewable coming from hydroelectric. We also have one of the largest wind farms just to the north of our property, which can sustain our entire project. So we actually have the ability to contemplate this mine as being a low carbon emission, if not even a zero carbon emission mine. And why do I say that? It's 80% of our capex goes towards our mill, gets plugged into the grid, which obviously comes from hydro. The other 10-15% is large haul trucks, which you can electrify in this day and age. It's not new technology. The only issue is bringing them up a pit. Obviously, there is an optimal rate of battery size that you put in these trucks. But there's also a technology that exists where you hook it onto a trolley assist function that also is driven off of the grid. And as long as you have the contours of a mine that support that, you have the ability to potentially create that carbon neutral, very low carbon emission environment. So what we did in our PEAs, we put out our carbon emission metrics on a per copper equivalent pound basis. It's not the greatest metric in the world, but the reason why we wanted to put it out there is we wanted to measure ourselves against that benchmark to say, okay, as we de-risk the project, we're going to get better and better and better. And all those technologies that I just described would not contemplate in the PEA.
Thank you very much for that. I think that brings us up to the top of the hour. So been a fantastic discussion today. So all that remains for me to do is to go and thank our guests, who were Sam Lee, Jennifer Schell, Warwick Smith, Justin Machin, and Sam Ash. Many thanks to our sponsors, who are Bunker Hill Mining, Northisle Copper and Gold, and American Pacific Mining, as well as the Resource Global Network. We have another show running tomorrow, so I hope to go and see some of you then. Until then, stay safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thank you. Thanks, Andrew, for organizing.